Hello, everyone. How are you doing tonight? Good. We didn't get rain right here, but that's okay. We still feel the humidity. Thank you all so much for coming tonight to hear Mary speak. I'm going to introduce her and then I'll let her take it over. So Mary creates ceramic wall installations that examine the human connection with nature and the environment. Work is driven by her interest in ecology and the many similarities between human and botanical anatomy. She received a bachelor's degree in fine arts from Arizona State University and a master's degree in fine arts from the University of Arizona, where she received the MFA Fellowship. Meyer lives and works in Gold Canyon, Arizona, and is an active member of the Metro Phoenix art community. Her work is represented in public and private collections in the US and internationally, which I'm sure that was all an understatement because there's very much more that you have done. With that, I'll turn it over to Mary. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Jenny. Can you guys hear me okay? I'm a little soft-spoken, so I'll try and speak up. So thank you so much for being here, taking some time out of your day to spend with us tonight. I see a lot of familiar faces, and so I appreciate you coming here tonight. So we'll get started here. If I can. Oh, maybe not. There we go. So I thought I would start out with this image I took a couple weeks ago. Ross and I were camping up by Happy Jack, where we like to go. And I took my macro lens and captured this shadow bug on an oak leaf. And this quote by Henry Thoreau, I thought also was very fitting. Nature will bear the closest inspection. She invites us to lay our eye level with her smallest leaf and take an insect view of its plane. So what is a leaf? I am right now a leaf student. With this project I'm working on, I'm learning a lot about leaves. And I'm sure that there are other people here that know a lot more about leaves than I do. But just as a review for some of us here, a leaf is a vegetative outgrowth from the stem of a plant. And the basic function of a leaf is to perform photosynthesis. And that's the process where the plants use the sun's energy to convert carbon dioxide into food. The most essential elements of this process are, of course, sunlight, water, carbon dioxide, and the green pigment chlorophyll. And chlorophyll actually absorbs energy from blue and red wavelengths, but it reflects the energy of green wavelengths. So that is why most leaves are green. Leaf color. So some of these images are actually from my yard. This is one of our pomegranate bushes. Leaves obviously contain other colors other than green. Most of them we see in the fall in in the high country in the Midwest. But trees like the pomegranate also have bronze or red early in the spring. Like this one, they're one of my favorite plants that we have in our yard. And I love the springtime when the the leaves start to emerge and just have this beautiful bronzy red color. So here are some parts of a leaf. We have the petiole, which is the main stalk that comes out from the stem. The blade is the main flat part of the leaf, and that is where the food production happens. The margin is the edge of the leaf. And then the midrib or the middle vein, that's where the vascular system is, and it kind of produces all these thinner veins that reach out. And then the apex, the tip of the leaf, is where water gathers and droplets gather. A few examples of leaf shapes. Of course, there's many more than what's shown here, but there are some recognizable ones here: obovate, oblong, oval, very common ones. And then on the right, leaf types. On the top row, you have the simple leaf, just the simple form. You have the palmate compound, which is has leaflets that all attach to the same place. And then pinnate compound and double pinnate compound are leaves also that we see a lot here in the desert. Below that, there's some leaf arrangements. Opposite arrangements is when the two leaves are arranged on the stalk opposite of each other at the same place, and then alternate, they're staggered. So a few reasons why I love leaves. I should say that I'm actually obsessed with them, obviously. That's why we're here. But they're very humble constructs of nature. They are the part of the plant that isn't always maybe the most appreciated, especially if it's a blooming plant, but they're ubiquitous, they're everywhere. And so I often stop and pick them up anytime I see them on the trails or on the sidewalk. I just find them so beautiful. And they also remind me of home, the two places that I've called home. I've lived a lot of different places, but the two main places I've called home, I grew up in South Dakota on a farm and spent my childhood there. And then we've lived out here for about 25 years. And so Arizona and South Dakota. A single leaf can symbolize stillness, solitude, growth, and change. It also has the ability to evoke a memory of time and place, a moment from childhood, or maybe one's own connection with nature. My practice is deeply informed by this curiosity about the natural world and the need for communion with place. So my work is very much driven by this interest in ecology and the interconnectedness of living things. I use a lot of different materials in my practice. Right now, I'm mainly focusing on clay and wood and metal found objects like pins and needles. And meditative methods such as carving and hand building. I use all of those, the materials, the processes, to explore the similarities that I see between human and botanical anatomy. I see the human form within so many things in nature, but most especially within leaves. So I'm going to go through just kind of a progression of my work. I'm not going to try not to spend too much time on some of the earlier works, but I think they're important to show, as you will see, that just the importance of leaves and botany and the progression of, I guess, how my work has evolved over the years. So this is student work. The upper right image is an image of iron castings that I did as an undergraduate. I did a lot of cast metal, and I was starting to explore natural form, human form, casting fruits and vegetables, and then carving human components that fit inside of the skins. And then on the left is one of the first pieces I created in graduate school. These are hand-built clay forms that are painted. The colors are inspired by changing leaf colors. Some artists that have influenced me and still do influence me: on the left, Andy Goldsworthy. He does site-specific ephemeral works in nature. This is an arrangement of leaves. He photographs them and then they dissolve over time. And then Peter Randall Page, who is a contemporary stone carver. He does a lot of work with nature, patterns in nature, and also botanical forms within his work. And most of his work is very large scale. He works with granite, all different types of stone, and places these works in the public sphere, so in parks and places where people can interact with them. Here's another detail image of the offspring piece and the different leaf colors. So moving along, this is my thesis exhibition, and it's titled Presence. It's painted ceramic and on a bed of sand, and then cast aluminum on the walls. And you can see here that even though I didn't really have leaves in mind when I was creating these pieces, they were more about exploring human form and symmetry, and that naturally kind of evolved into these leaf type shapes. The ceramic pieces are cast in aluminum, so they each have a partner that's hanging on the wall. And the aluminum pieces are each suspended by a sewing needle, which is a very important component in my work. moving along again, so there's a little lapse of time here. As you can see, these are all in order. After I finished graduate school, I took a little time off, went back to my prior career as a makeup artist, and that's what I did for 25 years or more, Megan. But then I started full-time as an artist again. So that was in about 2012, and studying forms in nature, century plants, trees, veining patterns of branches, and creating these pieces that, again, merging the human form with the botanical. Each of these are encaustic, mixed media encaustic pieces, and they each have a sewing needle stitched in the midrib or the spine of the piece. Another artist that has been very influential for me is Carl Blossfeld. These beautiful images of plant life, these studies. He also was a sculptor, he's a teacher, and I find that they're very sculptural in nature. He worked with metal, he worked, I believe, in an iron foundry. And so a lot of these have that three-dimensional quality, very, very detailed, and then again, working with the symmetry. The Luster series, this series, again, kind of speaking to leaves and veining patterns within leaves. The pieces are cast aluminum on wood panel, and you can see the veining pattern within the cast aluminum piece, as well as the veining patterns that are carved in the each panel. One important component of this series, and it's something that you'll see in my work and some of the other pieces that I show you tonight, is this idea of the pieces have this energy. And so I create these panels that have they form the shape of the leaf or the figure that's in it, almost like a concentric circles in water or sound waves, something that speaks to the energy of the forms. I believe that these pieces that I make are living things, and so I want to create that sense of them having an energy. So here's some color. This is a series that I did for a show in Boise, Idaho, and I was very inspired by the trees there and the colors, the leaf colors and leaf shapes. They really reminded me of the Midwest, South Dakota. And then I also grew up, spent the early part of my childhood in Illinois near Chicago. And so I wanted to create a series that was all about leaves and branching patterns and veins. So this is wood panel with paper, hand cut paper, and then I don't know if you can see in the image, but there's actually stitching in the veining areas. And the same thing here. So working again with leaf shapes, the veining patterns are established with pins. So these are little sewing pins that are applied in all the inner parts of the leaf form. So the year after that show, I started experimenting with leaf shapes in clay. And with my practice, I don't do a lot of drawing, but I do a lot of what I call sketching in 3D. So I kind of play around with forms in clay and work out designs that way. And so I was just playing with leaf shapes and making necklaces and just kind of having fun. And then the following year was a very big turning point in my development as an artist and my career as an artist. I received a contemporary form artist grant through the Phoenix Art Museum. And part of getting an artist grant, contemporary form grant, is you use the money to create a piece for the exhibition the following year. And I knew I wanted to create something with leaves. And I wanted to know how much wall space I had. So that would dictate how big can I make this? And so that's kind of where this whole thing evolved. These are porcelain leaves on the panels 15 feet long. They're all suspended by sewing needles. There's about 500 of leaves in this piece. So here they are. Before they've had pigment added to them or anything, they're porcelain. The the inspiration for all the leaves I created for that piece came from the Book of Leaves by Alan Coombs, and it's 600 pages of leaves. Each page has an illustration of a leaf. And so I literally went page by page and created a leaf for each one. And also Vintage Botanical Illustration is another I guess, resource that I look at for a lot of these elements that I add to my work. Here's a couple pages of the Book of Leaves, as you can see. And they're beautiful images. They're actually real images of leaves. So here the piece is a few years later. So this is from my solo exhibition at Mesa Contemporary Arts Museum. And 500 leaves wasn't enough, so I had to create more for this show. And so this one has 575 porcelain leaves suspended by sewing needles. Biophilia is the name of this work, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But so again, it's the same length. It's 15 feet long and has leaves from everywhere.
Karen, you created 575 for that piece, right?
Yeah, so I added 75. I added 75. So the previous piece that I showed at Phoenix Art Museum had 500. And then this is the same piece, but more. Yeah. And so biophilia has come to be a very important element in my work. But what does it mean? Some of you may have heard of it. It's become a little bit more well-known, I guess, maybe in the last 10 or 20 years. But the term actually means love of life. And it's this idea that we have as humans, this innate human tendency to want to connect with natural living things like plants and animals. And it's like part of our evolution, part of our DNA. And so it was coined by Erich Fromm, who's a psychiatrist. And then later, I think the word became more popular. Edward O. Wilson wrote a Biophilia, the book, in 1984. And I think it has become more popular since then. And he states it as the rich natural pleasure that comes from being surrounded by living organisms. So here's a detail of biophilia, and you can see all the different shapes. And I don't know if you can see the color, but there's a yellow ochre color in all the incised areas, and then a little bit of graphite as well. And I wanted to, these aren't leaves, but I wanted to show this piece. So this is the sister piece to the Biophilia leaves panel, another part of the solo exhibition at Mesa Contemporary. So I created, each leaf has a partner seed. These are black clay with graphite and pigment, the same number, 575 clay seeds. And this image was taken at Tucson Museum of Art. So that brings us to the Stillness series. This is a series that I created actually at the beginning of the pandemic. It was my response to the pandemic. Using leaves in this piece as symbols for strength, symbols for balance, and really that's pretty much what this piece is about, just finding balance. And each piece they're connected to the other ones, but they also have their own place as well. This was at the Approaching the Natural exhibition at Chandler Center for the Arts, affiliated with the Vision Gallery. And that's when I first met Jenny. So here I am in the studio, carving patterns on the wood panels for the Stillness series. I use a electric flex shaft and just, carve into those little pore patterns. Here are some examples of just how I work as far as using the Book of Leaves as a reference, botanical illustration, and then what I arrived at as final design of the leaf. And you can see, when you look at the illustration, you can see I kind of pick up some components there and add to the leaf. They're very simplified, but the other thing I want to mention about these is that each of these leaves that was inspired by that book is numbered according to the page so the silver birch is number 89. That is number 89 in the series. And I think I brought that one with me, so you can see that in person. This is another one I brought tonight. You can see, I love the shape of this leaf. It's from a tulip tree. This piece is 12 by 12 inches. You can see that carving of the pattern in the back of the panel. And then also you can see the leaf arrangement is alternate on the stem on the botanical illustration. It's a good example of that. And one of the components, so these have these human qualities. They also have botanical qualities. They have what I see as a little belly button. I add belly buttons to my work a lot. Some people see them as other things. I see them as belly buttons. And then finally in the stillness series, here is a leaf type that's palmately compound. So it has the 5, my interpretation of the 5 leaves that meet. And then this one is 16 by 16 inches. So that brings us to the project, the Leaf Connection project. It's a community engagement project. This is my first community engagement project. And what I want to do with this project is create connection through art and bring an awareness to our natural surroundings. So the project is created in collaboration with Metro Phoenix Ecoflora, and it exists on iNaturalist. So I created the project on iNaturalist in March of 2022. And what we do is invite community members to engage with the natural surroundings by observing and sharing images of leaf-bearing plants throughout Metro Phoenix, and then using the social platform iNaturalist to share those images. And the observations they contribute, not only contribute to biodiversity information that helps conservation efforts here, but they also inform a new art installation that I'm working on. By sharing these observations, project members also have the ability to connect with other naturalists on the site. And then also there's like botanists and scientists that help you identify what you're contributing to the project. So currently, I don't know if you can see the statistics on there, but we have almost 25,000 observations and a little over 1,300 species. And right now, I'm just planning on gathering the data to the end of the year. So here are some examples of some beautiful observations from project members. What to observe in this project is really any type of leaf that you like or that catches your eye on the ground, trees, bushes, anything in nature. You don't want to take a leaf of a house plant, take a picture of a leaf of a house plant. You want to, this is about going outside and engaging in nature. And so the project observations and the data directly inform the large installation that I'm creating. So, and I'll show you the map, what that looks like a little bit later. But what I'm enjoying about this project is that each leaf that I create is directly connected to a person in the community and something growing in the community as well. And if you look at the designs of the leaves, so they have the shape, they're pretty realistic in the shape. And I try and repeat the textures as well. If it's a smooth leaf, it has a smooth texture. If it's a fuzzy leaf, it has more of a fuzzy texture. And like if you look in the upper left corner, that's an Arizona desert thorn. It has these little tomato red berries on it. And so eventually these images right now are before I've done anything to them. I haven't even fired them, but eventually they will carry color. And they will carry color that is connected to that specific plant, and have these identifying factors, whether it be color, veining patterns, and then in the lower right, so that is an orange tree observation, and you can see the little 5-petaled flower within that design. And I want to mention that the number 5 is very important for me in this project because not only are there a lot of 5-pointed flowers in the desert plants that grow around the desert, 5 is also representative of the hand. And for me, the interesting thing, one of the interesting things about iNaturalist is when I started looking at the observations for scale, and a lot of times, that someone's hand will be in the photo. And to me, that's just another reinforcing this connection that we have with the plants and nature. So anytime that I'm, documenting this work, you will see that I'm holding the piece in my hand. So this is a creosote observation on the left, a beautiful observation from project member Steve Jones. And creosote is one of my favorite desert bushes. It also happens to be the most observed species in this project so far, with almost, well, close to 1,400 observations at this point. And you can see the shape of the leaf is repeated in the porcelain. And at this time, I am going to turn it over to Jenny for a few minutes, and she's going to talk a little bit about some of these desert plants.
Thanks, Mary. I realized I didn't introduce myself when I got up here. My name is Jenny. I am the coordinator for the Metro Phoenix EcoFlora project here at DBG, which is a community science project documenting urban biodiversity here in Metro Phoenix. So like Mary said, creosote has some really interesting characteristics to it. For one, we didn't get rain here today, like we said, but that is partially responsible for the smell of rain here in the desert. So this in combination with a chemical called geosmin, that's kind of like a bacteria mix of things in the soil. You get that petrichor smell from this. So the name of the game in the desert is water retention, right? How can plants store enough water to survive? Can anybody tell me one of the ways that creosote does that? I know there's some DBG volunteers in here. Yes, yeah, resinous leaves, right? Which is also responsible for that smell. So it has that kind of coating on it that helps it keep that water. Creosote doesn't drop leaves a whole lot. Palo Verde will do that as a tactic to kind of store water, and it can actually photosynthesize through its bark. So creosote's really interesting, and I don't know if you can, yeah, you can see pretty good on here. There's like kind of tiny hairs as well, which also add for sun protection. And I'll switch the slide here in a second. But the next slide is brittle-bush. And an interesting thing with brittle-bush, you know, you see it's very different in color. It's got that very pale, you know, very fuzzy look to it. Can anybody tell me why? So sun protection, it's kind of like sunscreen, right? It helps keep that water in, reflect that sunlight so the plant doesn't overheat and transpire too much and get rid of too much water. So it's a little added layer of protection too. It may have some herbivory protection for things that don't really want to chew on really fuzzy stuff. But yeah, really interesting stuff that our desert plants do to protect themselves and retain water.
Thank you, Jenny. So as Jenny mentioned, the next slide here is brittle bush. This is actually one of my observations. This was taken obviously in the spring while it was still green, just down the street from our house. And talking about the fuzziness on the leaves, what I was trying to do with this one, and I'm trying to do with a lot of them, is create that texture in the porcelain or whatever clay that I'm working with. So this is the second most observed species in the project with 520 observations, and the shape long ovate to deltoid, and then as Jenny was saying, the fuzzy hairs that help to protect it from the sun. Was there anything else you want to add to that one, Jenny? Mm-hmm. So here are some more examples of works in progress, and I actually brought quite a few of these, at least the ones that have been fired so far, so you can see them in person. There's different types of clay here that I'm working with. This is clay that I have, but eventually, since this project is going to be quite large, I'm looking forward to experimenting with new bodies of clay that I haven't worked with before. It's a research project for me, so I'm gathering research in a new way, using the online real data from living things, and then also using materials that, you know, trying new materials that I haven't worked with before, and looking forward to experimenting with pigment, underglazes, things like that I haven't really worked with much in ceramics. So you can go on to the next slide. So this is a map from iNaturalist. So these are all the observations so far. Each green dot is a leaf that was observed somewhere around the city. And then, so when you make your observation and you put it on an iNaturalist, it will map the area, pin the area where it was seen. And this is what I look to for when I get to the final installation of the piece. They are going to be arranged to where they were on the map. Kind of. I mean, it'll be in the general area. And here is a sketch. When I first was talking about this idea, I kind of was sketching it out. And you can see the leaves are pinned to little flat boards or panels with rounded corners. And I'm thinking about having some type of identification on them, the plant type, maybe the location and the date. What's reflected in this drawing is probably not as many as what I'm going to create, but it gives you an idea of, what I'm thinking of, the direction that I'm going with this project. And the other thing I wanted to mention about this sketch is the colors. So normally when we think of leaves, we think of green, and there will be green within these pieces, but I'm also thinking wider scope of color. When I think of urban desert, I think of not only nature, but also, the man-made things as well. So there's a lot of grays and cement colors and buildings. And there's also colors of native rock that I'm considering. So the part of this that I'm really looking forward to as well is just the experimentation with color and new materials and that. So I don't think if there's anything. Oh, they're going to be supported by a little pin too. Obviously in that picture, it might have a little red dot at the tip. I think that's the last slide. So I think at this point, we're going to do a Q&A maybe? Okay.
So if any of you have questions for Mary, we'll do Q&A for a little while and then can moderate. And then after the Q&A, you're welcome to view Mary's pieces. I would encourage you to please look at them up close. They're amazing with detail. And if you're interested in joining the project or joining iNaturalist, come see me and help guide you through that to join the New Connection project. So it's all hands. Yeah.
That's several months, like almost a year, I think. Yeah. Yeah.
Have you used any wild clay or wild pigment?
Not yet. Yeah, I'm interested in that though. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, and when you talk about bacteria, I didn't know if you knew this, and it's interesting how that they have linked learning ability to self-design in buildings, and that is mimicking the veins of the leaves in the architecture. It's also plants within the space and places to look out and see nature. That was always interpreted as a distraction for learning environments. Pay attention to the front door. It's not really where we are moving today. It's like about 20% and those distractions give stress between knowledge. It's interesting that you talk about say it's connection beyond.
Right. Thank you. I appreciate that. In fact, I don't know if I mentioned this. I might not have. I meant to. I had never, when I started working on the biophilia leaves piece, I hadn't really heard much of that term before until I was visiting with a friend of mine who's an architect, and we were talking about my work, and she mentioned that word, and it resonated with me. And so the more we were talking about the whole theory and the idea of biophilia and the design aspect of it, that's, you know, I was immediately drawn to it, and it's really continues to be the undercurrent of my work. The importance of, I believe, of creating that connection with the natural world to enrich our lives, but also to bring awareness, you know, awareness to our surroundings, and maybe, you know, I'm using a phone to take a picture of something. That phone is usually a very distracting object, but I'm using it here and also a social media platform to create, hopefully, some more connection with the natural world. So that's a bit of an irony to using these things for that. But thank you for mentioning that.
There's a biophilic cities network, also a community around the globe that institute these kind of concepts, which is really cool. I encourage you to check that out. Anybody else have questions? Well, Rick, go ahead. Stripe shirt.
Where will you present these to life?
I'm not sure yet. I'm talking to a few places, but yeah, I haven't secured any venue yet.
Let's go.
Dan.
The needle or the pen is really important to you. I'm curious, can you explain that a little further?
Yes. So the sewing needle represents many things for me. I started working with it in graduate school, looking at it as just a very distilled human form. And also it is a symbol of repetitious activity, meaning a lot of what I do in my work, I do carving, I do sanding, things that are very meditative, that kind of keep the body busy and let the mind wander. And much like experiencing nature, you know, if you need to think about something, maybe you go outside for a walk and you just kind of can relax your mind a little bit. So the sewing needle, it represents the repetition in my work, but it also, they're typically metal, and, you know, stainless steel or something metal, whether it be a pin, a sewing needle, they're always present. So it's always reflecting the here and now. And that early work that I showed you from my thesis, the cast aluminum that was on the wall, the important part of that for me is those pieces were always present. So they were always reflecting who was moving in the space, reflecting, you know, what's around them. And it's that state of presence that I get in the studio that I want to create with this work. There's two places where I get that state of, you know, being balanced, being present. It's in the studio and in the landscape or outside. So hopefully that answered your question. And the pins, with the same with the pins. And here also using them, you know, literally pinning something, mapping and pinning something. Yeah. Thank you, Dan. Yeah, so Jenny's going to help anyone that is interested. I hope if you're not signed up for the project, I hope you will, because I'd really love to make a clay leaf for you. But Jenny's going to kind of walk you through iNaturalist and how to sign up. It's easy. It's a free platform, and it's actually a really good opportunity to learn about what's growing around you.
So are you looking for native plant or any plant?
Anything really, anything that's growing out in natural spaces. Like I said, I don't think you don't want to take a indoor house plant. In fact, I think if you try and do that, they won't take it on iNaturalist if you take something indoors. But the whole point is to, and I know right now the weather is a little bit warmer to do it, but to get outside and just kind of connect with the leaves that are around you, connect with the plants that are around you. They don't have to be the most perfect, beautiful images. The point is just to, you know, to capture something.
Yeah, question here. Yeah. They're taking their own photos.
So when to participate in the project, you sign up for iNaturalist. You can make an account on iNaturalist, and then you can download the app on your phone, and then you just use your phone to go around and take images of plants, and then you upload them on the site, and the site will help. They usually make suggestions for identifying the plants, and then someone will help you identify if you need help. But it's all done through iNaturalist, so you don't have to send anything to me.
So Mary will go through the observations that are uploaded to iNaturalist. We're asking people to use a hashtag. So use hashtag belief connection, and we can look at those observations, and Mary chooses select leaves to make her forms from. Anybody else? I think we can do one or two more. Okay.
I have a question. I know that it has posted it to the platform, right? There's been a lot of exchange, some back and forth, and some dialogue that also happens on the site. I'm just curious as to, and usually somebody wants to read, and there'll be a string of posts that carry that conversation on. What is the most interesting fact when you want to say?
Why are you putting me on the spot? It's my husband.
iNaturalist, the way it works is you make an observation. So you take photos of plants. It will suggest identifications, and it's way more accurate than like leaf snap or the other ones that are intended for like house plants. This one's actually used by scientists. I use it for the work here I do as a botanical garden. But you make an observation, it will suggest what species, what genre that plant is in. It also goes fungus, animals, some people even do scat. It's really incredible. The resource that I have is, and it also geotags it so Mary can see where that leaf was observed, which is really cool. But scientists can weigh in on the identification, and they can agree or disagree with what iNaturalist suggested it to be. So the discourse is talking about it, and people go back and forth of, well, I think it's this subspecies, or it might be this one, and then there's eventually consensus. And a lot of people will pop in with information. So Steve Jones, as Mary mentioned in the presentation, is our local hero on iNaturalist. We call him Uncle Steve sometimes. But he will pop in information for you as well in the form of like comments and tell you why this plant is different from this. And so that's what he
No, it's a good question, and I'm glad you brought it up because I can't think of anything specific right now. But I will say to that is I do have conversations with people on iNaturalist, and it's connected. When I joined and started launching this project, I immediately became connected to all these botanists in the area that, they were active on iNaturalist, and just this whole community that is just active. And so I reach out and talk to people and have learned so much. And so that is a very rewarding part of this whole project, is just connecting with people that, I may not have had that opportunity to connect with before.
one more.
Well, congratulations on getting secured.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that was a lot of fun to do that. Yeah. Great memory.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you. I do want to say one more thing, is that I really want to thank Jenny. I don't want to embarrass you, but she's been so very supportive of me and this project. We've known each other now for a little over a year, March of last year. And so, anytime I've had questions or anything, Jenny has been very, very supportive and knowledgeable. So thank you. And thank you all for coming tonight. I really appreciate it, your support.
Like I said, if you want to learn about iNaturalist, come see me. If not, Mary's here to talk about her work, and you can see it up close at the table. Thank you guys so much for coming tonight. I appreciate it.